About 2 weeks ago, I started watching Breaking Bad once more, and I've honestly become addicted to it yet again. It's one of those shows that I know how it ends, and I know how things turn out, but I love looking back and analyzing it as a whole. I'm gonna narrow my analysis to season 1, as I believe it's the perfect place to start, where the stakes appear to be at their lowest, but still make you feel tense. Created and written by Vince Gilligan, we're taking to a fictional world that just feels so real. Upon rewatching, I've come to realize just how fantastic the whole thing really is. With so many iconic moments, such as the scene of Walter in his underpants, when he dons the sunglasses and fedora look, the "yeah, science" moment, and the throw of fulminated mercury. The show takes its time, and you don't even really get the iconic Walter White look until episode 6, along with the blue tint of the crystal meth. But you can just tell, this series is truly going to be a great watch, and why it got the recognition it did. Things start off so small: a meth lab in a Winnebago, the start of a new partnership, and the beginning of a criminal empire. Before we get started, I'd like to state my opinion on the show's status. I believe it's not overrated or underrated, it just is an amazing series. You notice the little details in Bryan Cranston's performance, portraying a somewhat pathetic character, unhappy with how his life turned out. There's a somewhat subtle rage built up inside of him, but to simply put, Walter White starts off as a pushover and a nobody, having only a small plaque to show any accomplishment. The cancer is a jumping off point for his inevitable realization life is completely unfair. His sex life sucks, as well as his job in a high school setting. It goes without saying that his pride is what pushes him to say fuck it and trying to make easy money cooking meth to pay for his family's future after he's gone. For all he knows, he might as well spend the rest of his life in a couple weeks, so he better spend it making as much as he can. And the way the show incorporates the relationship of his ex-student Jesse Pinkman is so great. The juxtaposing worlds between your everyday middle-aged family man and someone who turned to the streets is an interesting dynamic. Aaron Paul's performance seems so authentic. The writing for his underachieving nature is impeccably perfect. Also, their bickering is just so organic, and you see where both of them are coming from. My favorite episode of the season is where he moves back in his parents' place, only for the audience to realize he didn't actually grow up in a tough life. Deep down, Jesse is a good person, but because of his decisions, he is unable to just waltz into a business career. His only option seems to go back to illegal activity. Contrast this with Walter's fragile but financially decent life. You would almost be confused as to why he would turn down an opportunity for his friends to pay for his cancer treatment. His pride being a big factor, you know is going to play a bigger part later on. He refuses the help and would rather not see his wife and son see him as pathetic. His family as a whole has a good dynamic, having their fair share of trivial drama, but a closeness that is so believable. To explain, Hank, for example, a jokester and a part of the DEA, someone who you don't want to be getting in the way of Walter's plans, but also is someone who you get to know and see as a good man doing his job. As I've said before, we start off with a man, upon discovering he has a finite amount of time to live, decides to cook meth and lie to his wife where the money comes from. The goal for him is to make as much as he can before his seemingly inevitable death, and/or without getting caught. This proves to be quite difficult because Jesse tries to do business with some distributors who recognize Walt as a relative to Hank, part of the DEA, and try to have them both killed. This leads to the first murders that Walt has to do, both directly and indirectly, and lead him to some dark places. At this point, he isn't a killer, but he also can't let his family be harmed, so the first bit of blood has to be spilled on his hands. All tension comes from the small mistakes the characters make, such as Walt throwing the mask in the open field for the DEA to find, or Jesse not being able to follow basic orders. By the end, when Walt avenges Jesse by threatening Big Man Tuco, we as an audience know that Heisenberg isn't a real threat. He isn't the big baddie that he is by season 4, but by putting on the tough facade, He's able to get a deal going with his ingenuity. It ends with the duo working with someone who is clearly on the edge and ready to kill anyone who steps even close to the line, and is the perfect cliffhanger for the next season. But everything in between is so perfectly put together. From the indication of danger using color, foreshadowing in some episodes, to the motifs that just make the season worth the 9 out of 10 I give it. And this topic of color has been covered better and more in depth in other videos that I will definitely link in the description. But to prove even more that this show is a masterpiece, just look at this video by
Screen Crush.
Overall, I could see this show going down as one of the best in history. The first time I watched it, I became a little paranoid. I would ask myself, how is this going to be followed up? Every character movement and expression was being analyzed. It just became a little overwhelming for me. I do think that this is a good show, really well made, but boy was the tension just torturous. The fact that Hank is in the DEA right away tells you he's gonna be a huge adversary to the plot, but turns out to be quite likable in the series. You see him more and more as a man just doing his job, and you almost dread seeing him go through the things he does. Even characters like Marie have a strong relationship and purpose with the others, and to see them with their flaws that will pay later on is such an incredible thing to see and look back on. The show has been dissected thoroughly for using motifs, colors, and even names, but one discussion that interests me the most that I see to this day is the moment that people argue is when Walter White becomes Heisenberg. People think it might be this scene, or even this scene. I think you could try to pinpoint the exact instant he showed himself to be a baddie, but I think the show is deeper than that. With every crucial moment, more and more of Heisenberg is truly revealed. As some would say, all of his life has been leading up to this point, where he showed his true colors. Thanks for watching. I loved going back on the show, and it just inspired me to make a retrospective video on it. If you enjoyed and want to see more, you can show your support by subscribing. And until next time, here's to the 13th anniversary of Breaking Bad.